Hey everyone, Arthur here, finally back with a ridiculous amount of 100 obscure games to commemorate the channel reaching 10k subs. But this channel is truly not about me, it's about these awesome games made by awesome creative people with all their soul and that are not getting enough love, mostly because of the sheer amount of games that come out nowadays. So more than ever I see the importance of digging down beyond all the clutter, cause that's the thing, there are loads of crappy games too, and finding all the great stuff. And that's the whole purpose of the channel, whether in obscure games lists like this, or in reviews, or in the coverage of closing digital fronts. So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to get a constant stream of fantastic and yet unsung games or soon to be gone ones. I've been doing hidden gems lists for a while, so do check out the previous ones on the series, link in the corner, but this is the first video where I'm covering all modern systems on the same list. Of course, always giving all the availability information and games detail as usual, and we'll even separate a small portion of about 10% of the list to old school obscure games this time. Another small change to previous lists is that I will be including a few games not fully out yet, so long as they are playable in early access or demos, and I can be sure of their quality this way. Alright, that's enough. We have a crazy long list ahead of us. I realize this will take several sittings for many of you, so buckle down, grab food and drinks. Welcome to the channel. This is From the Void. Okay, this time I have to begin with one of the best action games in recent memory, Kill Knight. This is so good. Kill Knight is a waves-based action roguelike, meaning you have to survive increasingly overwhelming amounts of enemies spawning from every direction in small rooms, and it nails the action in an undeniably superior way. This is some top-notch action here. As you can imagine though, it's a lot of buttons and things to memorize and get used to. You have your fast-shooting pistols, a heavy weapon, which is initially a wide-spreading shotgun, as well as a sword for melee combat, and you need to use everything, because killing enemies with your sword is how you replenish the ammo for the heavy weapons, for instance. And there are lots of other mechanisms that tie with other things like that, which is exactly what makes it so dynamic and thrilling. And it goes well beyond that. I mean, check this out, seriously, there are 3 kinds of ways to reload your weapon. Depending on which button you press when you're reloading and do the correct timing for it, you can gain a boost for damage, absorb blood gems scattered around, or even perform a powerful melee attack out of the blue during reload. It's nuts, and there are special attacks and everything. It's a total blast, overwhelming for sure, but stick with it for infinite amounts of fun. Kill Knight, hell yeah. And this is just the beginning, you guys, let's go. Next, we've got Anomaly Agent. This is great. It's an action platformer with some cool combos and skills and a lot of creativity all around. It's impossible to be bored in this game. It really mixes it up with different gameplay sections, like chasing scenes, then an upside down subway passes on the top, and now you're fighting enemies inverted. The action is excellent, and there's a lot of humor in the story too. This is a very well made game in every possible way, and another largely obscure one that I cannot understand how it's not well known yet. Next is a game that should have blown up stratosphere high, because this is absolutely fantastic. We're talking about Mullet MadJack. one of the most stylish games I've ever played, and I'm not just talking about the graphics. The gameplay is hella stylish. You are on a timer and must move and kill robots fast. Reaching 0 means game over, but you are rewarded for killing robots spectacularly, like into hazards for instance. It's all very flashy and awesome, without making you feel lost by the speed or sheer amount of colors. It's a roguelike, mind you. After each stage you get to pick some power-ups and new items, which are very cool, but game over means starting all over. Unless the roguelike structure is something you can't stand, I'd suggest you give this a try, maybe play the demo, because the game is so much fun and tailor-made for this kind of gameplay loop. It is one of the best on the list. Cool bosses, cutscenes, music, it's got it all. Mullet MadJack, check it out. Next we have such an interesting game that is a mix of Nordic mythology, hyper-light drifter looking graphics, but gameplay focused on puzzle solving and mainly on rhythm battles. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff and I should have gotten your attention by now. This is Atone, Heart of the Elder Tree. This is rather impressive. The game takes itself very seriously, counting with voiceover, a well-made story with some dark tones, including death of characters, and the gameplay is very well made, jumping between light exploration sections that lead to some interesting puzzle solving, and then the battles, which are translated into a rhythm gameplay. Those are very well made, the music in them is just great, keeps getting better and better through the game, accompanying the story that gets more and more serious. So I mean, yeah, this is a mighty fine game that I believe very few are aware of yet. This next one is freaking fantastic, and what a brilliant soundtrack too. We are talking about the newly released Sulfur. What a pleasure to play this, such unique vibes. The locations, gameplay, and especially the music create something truly captivating and eerie at the same time. This is a first-person shooter, but a uncommon rogue first-person shooter. You know, I realize a good amount of people frown on the roguelike structure, but I find what really matters is how well done it is. I also don't necessarily gravitate to those, but some of my favorite games of all time are roguelikes, like Spelunky and The Binding of Isaac. It's all about how it feels to play and how much fun it is, despite the likely high challenge. And I'm happy to inform Sulfur very much fits that description. This is a great game, punishing but enticing in all the right ways. The dungeon is very cool to explore with lots of hidden stuff, and all the gear and items you can find are no joke. There's so much to discover here, it's crazy. I love the Diablo-like items menu and all you can do with it. One minor problem is that it's all too tiny in the menus, so playing it on the Steam Deck can be kinda painful, but everything else is amazing. And what a beautiful soundtrack, check it out. Sulfur, quite a find. Seriously, you guys, this next one is so good. How is this not a huge worldwide hit? What's going on? And to top it off, hands down, the best soundtrack in this entire list. No question. This is Everslash. Oh my god, this game, fun gameplay at its peak. Seriously, try this out. You control this little girl Mary with a freaking scythe, solving some troubles her scientist sister is involved with in the lab. The gameplay is simple but freaking fantastic. True genius here. Elegant gameplay design this is. It's all about the dash, which has a stamina bar. There's a special timing you can do it in, where you can actually stay airborne forever. Because if you do it right, it replenishes more than you spend, so you gotta keep a correct tempo. But level design, enemy behavior, and especially boss fights will pose a tall challenge through the entire game. Only problem is the length. Super short game here. But the price is super friendly, and seriously loads of fun guaranteed. Impossible not to like Everslash. dude, this next one is impressive. Nocturnal Enhanced Edition. Okay, this is a side-scroller action platformer all about staying in the light. You have a sword that can be imbued with fire, and that's how you carry flames from one torch to the next. And several sections of the level will include a miasma of darkness, where you will quickly die if you can't find a light source quick enough. This may sound kinda basic, even if I say that the level design complements the idea really well, but it's the combat on top of all that that really twists the gameplay into a fine mix. Because during the fights, inside the miasma, you have to worry about attacking, dodging, using skills, and rekindling your sword or spreading the fire somehow. It becomes a pretty awesome dynamic, trust me. Plus the beautiful graphics and excellent sound design, and we get a fantastic game here, check it out. Okay, next is a great looking 2 and 3D platformer Donkey Kong Country style that you can't go wrong with. This is Nikoderiko the Magical World. The only possible issue you can have with this game is that you may find it lacking in originality, because on the gameplay side this is almost exactly the same as a modern Donkey Kong Country game. Stages are relatively long, your character is rather heavy to control, not super nimble like many other platformers, in order to introduce a challenge in the controls themselves in a great way. You can ground pound, float a little, roll, you can connect some of those moves with each other, which feels great. Stages are full of hidden collectibles and bonus stages just like Donkey Kong, but Nikoderiko also counts with terrific cartoonish graphics. This is a beautiful game here, from the characters to the locations, and in the gameplay it mixes it up with a few interesting ideas, and especially in the fact that frequently the stages seamlessly become 3D for portions of the gameplay that will remind you of early Crash Bandicoot games. So yeah, hard not to love this game, high quality in every possible way. Nikoderiko, check it out. Moving on to Trinity Fusion. Okay, this is really great, and it's, believe it or not, a Metroidvania roguelike. You can make anything work with a rogue structure, I think we learned that at this point. But that's a minor aspect of the game. I say it because I have to discern roguelikes from non-roguelikes, but it matters little compared to the solid gameplay revolving around the 3 characters. Actually 4, because you can fuse them. The setting is pretty cool actually. All of the characters are a representation of the same entity or being, but in worlds apart, different dimensions. And each has different characteristics, weapons and gear, and you level up each one separately too. It's really nice and plays super well. The Metroidvania is real, though subdued, more about the interconnected locations and a few hidden things, and combat is fantastic. Fast, fun and fluid. Great game here, Trinity Fusion. Next is another one of those games where gamers loved it, but critics did not. Underrated, you could call it. This is Gori, Cuddly, Carnage. This is loads of fun. It's a hack and slash that actually fixes the monotony of button mashing with interesting combat systems that introduce a tall challenge. It's all reliant on the sentient floating machine companion you have, Frank the hoverboard. Thing is that using the hoverboard's many abilities, like boosting and slicing and doing some flashy special attacks, costs fuel, and you gotta kill the creepy cuddly creatures to refuel, so you can't waste your attacks in vain, otherwise it gets harder to take them down, making you more vulnerable. It's a nice balance that makes the combat thrilling and challenging. What critics complained about is the repetition, and seriously, it's really not a big deal. Yeah, repetition exists, I think it does in any game, so what repetition it has didn't pose a problem for me, so it's definitely a matter of preference right there. You don't need to listen to me, just search in the Steam platform and see the overwhelmingly positive scores. Over 97% of the over 700 reviews it got so far. So yeah, I agree to those much more than I do to the critics, as usual. Other than the very cool combat, Gori also has impressively deep exploration and platforming with the hoverboard, which is also loads of fun, a kick-ass soundtrack you're listening to in the back now, and a striking art style, which you may or may not like, so once again, not a definitive negative, rather a possible positive. Great game here. Next is a game that launched with some bugs and lacking in some quality of life things, but it has since been patched to solve all that, so it's now an excellent game, but public perception hasn't caught up with that yet. This is They Always Run. Action platformer with a nice twist. Your character has a third arm, which you must use in combat to surpass enemy shields. You use it by flicking the right stick, otherwise not used in the game, to the direction you want to hit. This really modifies how you have to think to perform this action and makes you always be on your toes looking for opportunities to use it. You need to replenish a meter in order to use the third arm, which forces you to use all your other skills as well, making for a great gameplay design. Hard to learn at first, but a joy later on. They Always Run is very nice. Check it out. Okay, this next one is straight up one of the top 5 on the entire list, which is saying a lot if I do say so myself. This is Last Night of Winter. The simple, almost Undertale-like pixel art may be underwhelming for some, but gameplay is insanely good. So I beg of you, look past that. It may look simple, but the gameplay goes beyond the Zelda-like action-adventure genre by even adding meaningful, well-made and satisfying platforming to the gameplay. There's also puzzle solving, loads of exploration, and combat with different weapons and items that you can equip to the 4 shoulder buttons. You do have a stamina bar here, but I would say it is not too similar to Souls-likes in that way, as it's quick to replenish, and some actions like dodging may not even spend stamina when it's more than half full. The different weapons and skills make for a very satisfying and deeper than it seems combat, and like I said, all other aspects are also excellent here, so this gets my highest recommendation. Awesome game here, Last Night of Winter. Okay, now for a fantastic game that I bet over 90% of the audience never heard of. This is Duck Paradox. Dude, this is crazy good, seriously. What a fun game. I love it so much. And I hope that the explanation of it being an action platformer roguelike doesn't spook you, cause you would be missing out on a great and completely unique hidden gem here. There's another potential obstacle for you liking this game. It takes a minute to understand it because of how very unusual it is. You control this scientist girl with a gun, and the objective in each stage is to find the quark duck while fending off against never-ending crazed ducks trying to stop you. The duck you have to save is usually very close to the entrance, which is also the exit, so you can easily and quickly defeat a stage by grabbing quark, then going back and defeating a few ducks to power up the portal. But exploring each stage more thoroughly will reveal a bunch of special eggs that are very important to also bring back, because that's how you unlock new and important upgrades and skills. Roguelike style, because this game is hard as hell and improving your stuff is paramount. So it's always a gamble of going for the exit or the eggs, and how many of them, because the longer you stay on a stage, the more crazed and frequent the enemy ducks get. This makes for an awesome balance, and as soon as you understand it, the game becomes hard to stop playing in a great way. There are many hidden things and some important things you carry over to help you being able to unlock some doors to help you out in the future. Awesome, man. Duck Paradox, completely out of left field and a treasure. Check it out. Okay, this may be more well known, but still far away from the deserved amount. This is Cyberhook. Cyberhook is a first-person parkour game with a grappling hook and its peak gameplay here. What a thrilling and captivating game. So yeah, self-explanatory this game. You throw your hook while aiming in first person, which is totally different from the feeling of shooting in first person in an awesome way. Then you sway from the hook, then jump off, snap your fingers to slow down time and grapple hook again. Then shoot some regular shots to break glasses and stuff, and all in a freaking fantastic collection of stages with great level design. Brilliant is what it is. Must play game in my opinion, and there's also a DLC already. Next is a deeply obscure game, very cool and not at all what it sounds. This is Redo. Okay, the name may suggest to you this is a roguelike, and I'm aware many of you don't like rogue games, so it's important to say it is not a roguelike at all. But this is tough as nails and very much an old school style Metroidvania, and an excellent one. If this had been a SNES game, it would be a major classic nowadays. Because by old school here I mean the controls are not super fluid, not being only about skill, but also requiring strategy in the gameplay itself. It's hard to explain, you gotta feel it for yourself, but basically to balance the limited movement of your character and make the gameplay much more interesting, enemies have a stun meter, which is the number on the right that when depleted cause the enemy to enter its stun state, which most times render it vulnerable, but sometimes also place it in a berserk mode. This is very interesting, making each encounter challenging and strategic, as you have to take it seriously, trying to find openings to attack and defend with the several varied weapons and gadgets you find, including a shield, which you allocate to the face buttons as you like. So yeah, this is definitely a awesome, challenging and deeply obscure game I'm happy to share here, which deserves a lot more recognition. Redo, try it out. Next is a recent entry in one of the best vertical shoot 'em up series of all time. This is Sol Cresta. I don't hear nearly enough people highlighting this one, so even though it did get a limited run release, I still believe there are people who passed on it without realizing how great this is. The Cresta games are famous, mostly in Japan, because of the unique gameplay they offer, making them quite refreshing and awesome shoot 'em ups. The main feature is the Megazord style fusions with the 3 ships that you can manually modify for varied and quite incredible effects. Each of the 3 ships represents a life. If you lose the 3rd one, you're dead. Each has a different kind of projectile, and the one you have up front of the Megazord formation will be the main weapon. Then the middle one will also shoot, but less frequently, and the back ship won't shoot at all. So you can rearrange them manually to get any result you want, and you gotta do that in the middle of the stages, so it's a full gameplay feature here, and you can do a lot more with it by making all kinds of different formations like triangle pointing up or down, or a horizontal line, vertical line, all 4 of the possible L shapes, and that way you can enter special attack formations that use your special meter and do some devastating stuff. It's awesome, man. There are further incentives to change formations, making Sol Cresta a frenetic and deeply enjoyable game. Try it out. Moving on to non-stop fun and pumpiest soundtrack ever, Planet Cube Edge. This is fantastic. I love the graphics, the color palette is kind of like a OG Game Boy, but the pixel art is actually quite detailed, especially for the characters. Gameplay wise, this is usually about small or medium-sized rooms or sections with high difficulty platforming. And later you also get a gun, so this also turns into a run and gun game. Your character controls super well, except for a heavy inertial momentum to start moving, which doesn't feel bad or anything, it's just there to increase the difficulty. Planet Cube Edge is awesome, you guys. Must play in my opinion. Of course, for platforming fans that is. And it's available physically too. Next one is a bit weird but rather enjoyable. Dungeons of Hinterberg. Okay, this is great. The weird part about it is the setting and story, which hits you right away. This takes place in a modern time, but in a city where dungeons appeared inexplicably and they're filled with monsters, and this became a tourist attraction. Weird, right? But also interesting, and it develops nicely, making sense of it somehow, so it keeps you hooked. Not that it really needs it, because everything's fantastic here. The game counts with an artsy look that makes places seem otherworldly sometimes, very nice graphics, the music's very good, diverging from the typical stuff of other action RPGs in a great way, and gameplay is perfect, man. You have a vast world to explore, actually several vast worlds, as the game is not simply divided into dungeons, but rather into sprawling areas with several dungeons each and filled with secrets. So exploration plays a big role. You can do the wandering about and getting in trouble when finding monsters out of your league. There are lots of clever environmental puzzles all over the place, and then in the dungeons things get even more serious as combats are more frequent and harder, and you don't have access to buy items and stuff. And then at nighttime you return to town and socialize to improve some stats, which in return improves specific traits for combat as well. Very nice gameplay loop here. This is a sure shot if you like what you see. Go right ahead. High quality game here, Dungeons of Hinterberg. Really hoping for physicals for this one. It truly deserves it. Moving on to a very creative game that truly deserves a bigger spotlight, and a rare one that may play better on multiplayer, but it plays great on single player as well. This is Crawl. Okay, what a cool idea for a game. You're a poor soul trying to escape these unholy catacombs or whatever this is, full of creatures trying to kill you, and they will overwhelm you soon enough. But dying is not game over in this game, not at all. As you die, you become one of the spirits haunting this place. And as a soul, your objective is to get your body back. Whoever kills the hero gets to possess it. To do that, you can haunt objects and summon creatures that you control. Then you need to reach level 10 before the NPCs or your friends, and then you can go through the portal to fight the boss. Where, by the way, each appendage is controlled by a spirit. Pretty cool. Every new floor you reach grants the player the ability to upgrade their monsters to make the hero killing easier. So yeah, dude, what a crazy cool twist for a dungeon crawler action RPG here. Music is awesome and graphics are well detailed. This is totally a cool game. May seem like it wouldn't be in single player, but it totally is, and multiplayer is probably even better. What a thrill. Check it out, man. Crawl, quite a hidden treasure here. Next, an absolutely obscure game that surprised me very much, Necro Story. I really hope this one can become more well known, because Necro Story is a treat. This is a turn-based RPG similar to some Paper Marios in many ways, but the battle system is very unique and lots of fun. Instead of having your characters wait for their turns, the main character's skills are bound to time bars. So it's still turn-based, but this really flips it on its head, because effectively you can use skills at any time, especially when you have a bunch of them. There are several kinds of dark magic to learn, with full skill trees like poison, darkness, raising the dead, and life stealing, each with their particular use in battle. So you have to be vigilant and use the correct skills all the time, while the game shakes things up even further by adding another active aspect to the battles. You can aim your staff to grab mana crystals, replenishing your mana, which is very important, and then enemy souls can also be absorbed after you defeat them, and those are your experience points. You gotta be quick about this, so it makes the combat even more dynamic. The souls can also be used to recruit monsters to your party, which is another cool aspect of the game, on top of a great exploration, puzzle solving, and awesome skill trees abilities. We're talking about a great game here, Necro Story. Plus, I really love the graphical aesthetic here, kinda crayon looking, and the whole dark tone of the game that contrasts nicely with the humor, which is witty and fun. Lovely game, Necro Story, truly deserving of any RPG fan's consideration. Next, a blast from a more or less distant past with some of the best music in all of video games, Shatter. Okay, what made me discover this game was the music. I heard it randomly and had to find out where it came from, and found this game, which is a true evolution of the breakout style of gameplay. You not only reflect the ball, but more importantly can create a gust of air to blow away or suck in everything on screen, including the ball. It's crazy, and you can somewhat intuitively modify the ball's route with this, breaking the tediousness that usually happens in the end of a breakout stage when there are few blocks to bust but you can't seem to hit them. And it also allows the game to be much more creative in terms of levels and boss fights. Fantastic game here and an absolute blissful soundtrack. Oh, and by the way, do get the original Shatter, preferably not the remaster, because apparently they modified a bunch of things that make the game less good, including the soundtrack. Next, yo, this is creepy as shit. Hollow Cocoon. Okay, graphics here take the spotlight, right? Photorealistic and detail, a perfect match. And it's important too, because this is supposed to be very immersive, as horror games should, to intensify the scary. So it's great that Hollow Cocoon accomplishes that with flying colors, making it a, let's call it, dreadful joy playing through, or joyful dread, however you prefer, because this is scary, man. The story is creepy, revolving around the protagonist's grandma, of all people, in a countryside Japanese village, which is always creepy by itself, and with a signature Japanese style horror, which is freaky, man. Holy shit. If you're looking for a new scary game, you found it. Hollow Cocoon. And yet another game for the ever-growing list of unbelievably obscure games that are actually excellent is Extra Coin. What a find this was, I gotta say. This whole game is unique and super interesting in so many ways. The story is absolutely great, happening in a dystopian future where most of society now lives partially or fully inside a virtual reality. The main character has a rare amulet that exists in both realities and allows her to see real identities of people inside the virtual world. I mean, seriously, this is a great story. Then the gameplay is completely unusual. Basically, each day you can choose two paths to visit where you can meet people and either do some mini-game activities to increase your stats like speed and power. There are many different kinds of mini-games, all simple but fun. And then for the other half of the day, you can do the main activity, which is a freaking racquetball match against the CPU. This may sound off-putting and it takes a little while for this gameplay to click, but honestly, it's a joy when it does. There are special skills, passive skills, and the stats make a big difference, so progression feels great, and this is completely refreshing as a game. So yeah, we are looking at something truly different here. Extra Coin, check it out. Real fun and interesting hidden gem here. Next is 9 Monkeys of Shaolin. This is an excellent beat 'em up. What I love the most about it is how each and every move feels like they connect when hitting enemies. And you have a nice progression system too, learning new skills and improving them with skill points as you go. You also gain new weapons and gear, and enemies are varied and interesting in terms of behaviors. Reading all of them in a crowded fight is a tall challenge, and boss fights are pretty awesome too. Great game here, 9 Monkeys of Shaolin. Next, we have quite an experience, a game that goes well beyond the end screen. Slay the Princess Pristine Edition. This is an enhanced release with new scenarios and endings of Slay the Princess, and it's coming in physical form as well. And dude, this is such a different game, even within the visual novel category it's in. It's actually an experience very much tailor-made to fit the visual novel video game structure. This would be impossible to replicate in any other format. The unusual story here counts with only 3 characters: the hero, the princess, and the narrator. That's it. The narrator invades the story a lot, conversing with the hero from the beginning, and you as the hero are tasked with slaying the princess, a weird premise on itself, as she is said to be the bringer of the end of the world. And as you meet her, she is actually a very weird character in many ways that make you doubt her humanity, so it's up to you how to act. I love that you have so many options in several of the interactions, and I really love how the game evolves depending on how you treat her, because she will shift her demeanor, personality, and even her entire appearance accordingly. It's actually pretty impressive. Death is a common result, but after dying you go back in time while keeping the knowledge acquired. But so does the princess, but not the narrator. And you also develop multiple personalities that talk to each other in a very amusing way, making the game even more interesting because this is a horror-inclined visual novel but also counts with a lot of humor, striking a great balance, which has got to be difficult to pull off. You probably have more questions than you did in the beginning after my brief explanation here, and that's a great thing because it's exactly what the game brings to the player as well. Next is a great example of why I think it's so important to cover lesser known games. This is straight up excellent and deserves to have blown up in popularity. We're talking about Kraino Origins. This is excellent and similar in many ways to Shovel Knight. While it may lose on a few aspects including originality, this is definitely an awesome game with spot-on difficulty, great looking graphics and color, and a tight gameplay both on the platforming as well as on the action, especially boss fights. This is great, you guys. If you are a fan of Shovel Knight, it's almost impossible not to like this. Kraino Origins, give it a go. The next game is 100% unique, 100% obscure, and as bizarre as the name. This is GORSD. GORSD is... what is it? I don't know. It's GORSD. It's very GORSD. I mean, what the hell was this? You control this weird octopus looking guy, but I'm pretty sure everyone becomes the worm later, because this is a hard game at first, and becoming the worm is what happens when you fail a few times. But dude, what the heck gameplay is this, right? Well, it's not like anything else, I'll tell you that. I guess you can place it on the shooter thing, like theoretically, but dude, this doesn't look anything like a shooter, right? And it doesn't feel like a shooter either, because everything is different here. So okay, your movements is like you're in rollerblades. You cannot stop, only change directions at intersections or by going back 180. It makes it all very frenetic. Stages are almost always, like 90% of the time, versus the CPU, usually multiple of them. And the actual shooting is also totally unconventional. You can only shoot forward in the same lane you're in, but, major but, because this is the main point of the whole game, you can also apply an effect to your shot, basically making it turn in the next intersection left or right at your command. And this is literally game changer. You have to be pressing left or right in the moment of your shot, but you also use the directionals to change your direction, so it's a purposefully confusing and hard to perform command. And what a cool challenge it creates, a feeling completely unique to this game. And objectives during the matches vary a lot, sometimes against several enemies, sometimes the stage is really different with unique rules, sometimes it's a mini puzzle, and the boss fights are no joke. Very hard game overall, very odd in many ways, including music and graphics, and an absolute joy. An absolute joy. GORSD, man. Wow. Next is a rather alternative looking game, but don't judge it by its cover. This is pretty excellent. Lucah, Born of a Dream. Okay, yeah, the graphics are really crazy and weird, some may not enjoy it, and I get that, but if you don't completely hate it, you may want to consider giving it a try because what a awesome gameplay, especially because of the combat system revolving around the several familiars you can choose from and that you unlock as you go. Each has their own color, and you can assign such colors to all your attacks, changing everything. In the end, there will be a vast array of possible combinations, and you are sure to find one to fit your style and the challenge at hand, which is important because this is a tough game. Exploration is also confusing on purpose, which is another aspect that may scare some people, but if you're not, you'll find a very impressive game here, Lucah, Born of a Dream. Moving on to the badass beat-em-up Wulverblade. This is a side-scroller beat-em-up where you control the angriest Vikings around, and let me tell you, the controls are absolutely solid and there are many mechanisms in place like throwing weapons, secondary two-handed weapons, grabbing enemies, defending with the shield, running actions, all making for a very fluid and fun gameplay with lots of options for the player. You also have multiple characters to choose from. This is a real nice beat-em-up that deserves more attention, Wulverblade. And it also counts with a physical from Super Rare Games. Okay, next, what a unique gameplay, making it deeply interesting. This is Tenebris Pictura. Okay, this is definitely on the top 3 weirdest games on the list. Gameplay wise, it offers combat and puzzles. The puzzles are usually about getting through these pink ectoplasm sections. You usually do that by turning into your spiritual form and activating these towers close to them. Then you return to your physical body and move stuff around and can jump over ectoplasm gaps. It's pretty interesting, I gotta say. And then combat is also pretty interesting and also about spiritual versus physical. Enemies are specters, so you will have to keep your body safe behind cover while you turn to your spiritual form and do the fighting with them. This is a tough combat and keeps getting tougher with very interesting skills and strategy. So yeah, weird for sure, but a real fun game, man. Lots of meaningful exploration, puzzles, and combat wrapped around a weird story as well. Now, a deeply obscure game with a completely unique gameplay called Amedama. Okay, this is really different. You control a character who is trying to save his sister, but he's killed in the process in the beginning. But the gods are not okay with that, so you can now possess living creatures, including very unusual ones like a drunken elderly guy and non-human creatures as well. So you possess, you have to defeat them in combat, and as you can imagine, each creature controls completely different, both in combat as well as in the society here too. Different characters grant you access to different buildings necessary to progress the story, so yeah, you understand the gameplay idea here. It's pretty cool and focuses deeply on this, making it stand apart completely. Amedama, really cool game, no one knows. Okay, now a magnificent and cozy puzzler called Birth. This is great. Birth has a similar style of puzzle gameplay as found in games like A Little to the Left. You solve puzzles with everyday objects arranged in puzzling ways with many different kinds of them. It's actually pretty impressive, you never know what's coming next. I also really like how you get some items as rewards and have to later use them in other puzzles, adding a very nice extra layer. The graphics and creatures are intentionally weird and very artistic in interesting ways too. Lovely game here, Birth, easy pick. Next, we have a real nice looking and playing game called Saviorless. The story here is quite interesting and creative and leads to you having access to multiple characters in an interesting way. Most of the game is a puzzle platformer where you control this guy. The puzzles are pretty great, there are always enemies that can kill you, so some skill is required on top of your puzzle solving capabilities, and the world reacts to your modifications in beautiful ways. Then on other sections you control a different creature, and the gameplay focuses on the action then, with boss fights and everything. Very nice here, Saviorless, quite a package of great features. Moving on to the totally crazy and pretty awesome Cavity Busters. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. I think you control some sort of dental defense microorganism and have to clear someone's mouth of all sorts of bacteria and stuff, but that doesn't really matter. It's all just an elaborate excuse to have all sorts of different weird looking monsters to kill, as well as to do a lot of teeth related puns. What really matters here is the great gameplay and progression system. This is a top-down shooter roguelike with close similarity to the indie juggernaut The Binding of Isaac. The structure is very similar, with an emphasis on loot gathering to improve your stats and skills, but the real flair of the game comes from the creative gameplay ideas. You can do a massive jump that slows down time, so you can choose where to fall, including on top of enemies, so it's useful for both attacking as well as escaping messy situations. And you can also do a dash to stick to walls and shoot from them. You can stay for a good amount of time on the walls, and you can launch away from it as another way to attack. All this is demanding to learn, but makes for a pretty dynamic and deep gameplay, which I enjoyed a lot. All the different things like currencies and NPCs are a little too cryptic on purpose, making you feel kinda lost in the beginning, but soon enough you will get all the game's quirkiness and enjoy them a lot. Awesome roguelike here. If you're into the Binding of Isaac like games, this will likely not disappoint. Next is a lovely game called Passing By a Talewind Journey. This is a joy for anyone looking for a cozy, relaxing time. Passing By is 100% a game based on exploration. You have a flying ship and the world is filled with floating islands to discover. All the systems in place here are very well implemented. Passing By has a lot of survival meters to care about. Hunger and thirst, temperature also plays a role, and a lot of other stuff related to your ship, like gas that you use to lift, your sail to go faster, and your anchor. You have full controls of all that you do moving through the ship itself, which is really cool. Then on the islands you explore for resources, meet people for some tasks, and discover a lot of interesting things. Everything is very pleasant and smooth, including the graphics. Nice game for sure, Passing By a Talewind Journey. Another magnificent game I really want to highlight is How I Learned to Skate. This counts with some very interesting controls. It's the whole purpose of the game, in fact, and creates a unique and interesting experience. You can play this with the mouse, but it's even better with a controller. You press L to slide with the left leg and R with the right leg. But also you use the left analog stick to move the left leg, and same with the right analog stick and the right leg. This is totally physics based, so it wants you to do the actual movement that would be done in the actual act of ice skating. It's really cool. Impossible to really convey this with words though. You gotta try it and it's highly recommended. The game is tough, by the way. Some really narrow passages and moving things will test your skills. But what a unique game. How I Learned to Skate. I love it. This next one is not fully out, but clearly it's excellent and coming from fellow Brazilian developers. This is Mark of the Deep. Okay, this is a Diablo-like and a rather well done in every possible way. Combat counts with a cursed blade and a flintlock pistol, because this is very much pirate themed, which is pretty cool, as well as a dodge move and a charge attack. Nothing too bombastic, but the combat design and especially enemies designs are excellent, making for a great moment-to-moment combat. Same can be said about the exploration, which is meticulous and full of secrets, in a way I really appreciate for an isometric adventure like this. This is not a roguelike, by the way, it's a full-on adventure with a Metroidvania feel to the map. Awesome game, Mark of the Deep. Moving on to the frenetic twin-stick shooter Uragun. This is pretty cool. It's a roguelike twin-stick shooter with a nice progression and a mecha full of cool stuff to use. You have two main weapons which you can change to a big number of possible options, grenades, area bursts to get rid of mobs too close to you, and a powerful dash that makes you immune and can even reflect projectiles. Progression is interesting in a typical roguelike way with both permanent and temporary upgrades. What I appreciate the most about Uragun is the satisfying gameplay for sure. Okay, this next one is impressive, check it out. Note that this one, however, is not fully out yet. You're looking at Project Tower. Yeah man, this looks pretty dope, doesn't it? Amazing graphics and gameplay here. Third person over the shoulder shooting action, with the enemies unleashing bullet hell looking attacks. Mind you, it doesn't really feel like playing a bullet hell for the most part. It's different as you have more time to react and thus can be more precise. If you've played the Nier games, or Returnal in a way too, this is similar to that. And it's a great gameplay for sure. Project Tower also counts with other two hooks. The boss fights are a spectacle, and on the gameplay you have the ability to freaking shapeshift into some of the creatures you defeat and use their moves, flipping the whole game on its head, making it wildly cool. Let's see if they use that to a great degree, and this could be a fantastic game, Project Tower. Keep an eye out for that. Next on the list is Lotus Lantern. This is an action roguelike with a pretty great combat. You have a few weapons to choose from and you unlock a few more as you go, and they provide some wildly different gameplay. The one I like the most are these rotating orbs around you, which you can command to strike the enemy at a distance, use them as boomerangs and stuff, and if you play well they keep increasing in quantity, so you can wreak some serious havoc with this. I found it really cool. The downside of the game in my opinion are the sceneries. I do like the graphics for the characters and the animations and enemies, but locations feel too barren and lacking on well-defined art design, but still a mighty fine action roguelike worth playing for fans of the genre for sure. Next is a rather wholesome and fun little game called PomPom: The Great Space Rescue. Gameplay here is exactly like another game I covered recently called Lucidity, where you do not control the main character who moves automatically, but rather create a path for him using many different kinds of platforms. But PomPom actually fixes the major issue of not having enough time to react and place your objects, because you have a button to stop time here. This lasts on a timer, so you can't abuse it, which still allows the game to be very hard, but it's more fair than the comparison. Excellent game here with many different ideas, different stages, other fun mechanisms, and a clear inspiration on Super Mario World with the little cutscenes and small boss fight arenas and some other clear references to that game. I love it. Do check this out. It's a cheap game, very much worth the asking price. Next is a very complex game, great for people who like uncharted exploration. Bulwark Falconeer Chronicles. Okay, like I said, this is super complex and overwhelming at first, so be advised. But there is definitely a deep immersive game here. This is a city builder for a change. It also counts with combat and lots of decision making. The complicated part comes from the sheer amount of stuff you need to do and the controls, which are not user friendly. But the main thing you gotta do here is keep building, but gaining access to the resources in order to be able to build is really difficult. You gotta connect the resources to the settlements, and very frequently that will require you to link islands through docks and assign the correct kinds of ship to bring resources far away. Some very important items are locked behind things you have to do, but you have to figure that out yourself, and the combat system is also complicated in the game. So yeah, this is great for people looking to buckle down with a deep game and learn it trial and error style. No hand holding here. A great one if you like that. Next we have old school style turn-based RPG Alterium Shift. This is a very good looking RPG, currently in early access, but with a lot of content already. Cutscenes and story are very well made, and a big highlight here, exploration is also excellent. You have a lot of options since the beginning, feeling like the world has a lot in it, but the combat may be a watershed aspect, because it's pretty much exactly what you find in all SNES RPGs. Simple stuff like attack, defense, skill, spell, items, and that's it. So if that's the way you like your RPGs, very classic, this will be a great one to try. Next is Omegabot. This is simple, just a side-scroller run and gun, very well made though. I love how you can extend your jump by shooting down in mid-air, great and simple mechanism and organic to the run and gun format. I found the colors a bit overwhelming, that may be just me, and nonetheless this is a lots of fun game and a nice challenge too. Next is an excellent Metroidvania that passed by largely unnoticed since its release in 2020, Mindseas. This gets what makes Metroid great. The pacing, which is all kinds of enticing, the creepy atmosphere, sounds and creatures, and some great level design that perfectly complements the solid gameplay. Loads of secrets here, awesome boss fights. I love the visuals with the larger than usual pixel sprites and the animations, especially for your melee attack, which makes the game feel even more fluid. I mean, yeah, I can't say enough good things about Mindseas. If you like what you see, this is a sure bet. Next is a trio of games all found in the same physical collection. It also counts with a fourth game I already talked about, while one of the other ones is the namesake, a Monsters Expedition. Okay, this is such a great cozy puzzle game. You have to go from island to island by connecting them with tree trunks that you can move around. You can roll them like a barrel or flip them up tall and back down. Rolling makes them go all the way until they hit something, and to make them turn into the other direction is not that simple. Then there are other kinds of trunks. You can also make little rafts. It's a whole thing. Lots of fun and challenging puzzles here, and the setting is a hoot. Apparently this is after humanity is gone and monsters found all our stuff, and this is a open doors exhibition of all of it, with the hilarious explanations that the monsters came up for each artifact. Great game here. Then on the same collection is Cosmic Express, another great puzzler with a fun idea. You draw the path for the Cosmic Express train to go through, and it will pick up aliens and drop them in the correct houses. The thing is, your train has limited seating. There are multiple kinds of aliens, including some that will introduce new rules, and you can't make lanes cross. So you can imagine how complicated it gets, making this a very cool puzzle game. And finally, Sokobon, which is chemistry, man. Finally, all the chemistry stuff we learned in school are gonna get some use. You have to form the molecules with the atoms by bonding them. Lots of restrictions on how to move them around, makes it difficult, and it's so cool that you can even do double and triple bonds between the same atoms, showing how faithful this is to the actual chemistry rules. So sometimes actually knowing chemistry helps here, believe it or not, making this kinda badass. So yeah, very interesting game here, very creative, and all of these three games come in the A Monster Expedition and Early Adventures pack, along with a game I previously covered in this series called A Good Snowman is Hard to Build. Another fantastic puzzle game. Next is a surprisingly high production value in Ari Buktu and the Anytime Elevator. This is straight up a platformer with a real nice design and graphics, as well as great voiceover and music. The character designs are hit or miss. I, for one, am not a big fan of floating limbs, but it didn't bother me too much or anything. And there's a good amount of humor here, which I found nice, and stages are varied. Sometimes real big and dynamic, and other times changing the gameplay with well-made minecart sections, for instance. I love it. Great platformer here, Ari Buktu. Next is one I found definitely underrated, Wreck and Ruin. This is a good-looking isometric action adventure where you control a demon in an evil mission for a change. The action has some bullet hell situations for which you can use a bubble shield, and you have a wide assortment of weapons and items which can be assigned to your quick toggle list and picked with L and R. The potential problem with the game is that it lacks a lot of explanations. Items are not well explained and you get insanely lost here. So many will find this irritating, while others may like the lack of handholding. It's definitely a solid and fun game if that's not a problem for you, and it also counts with a physical copy from Premium Edition. Next is one that I've been meaning to talk about, Candleman. What a lovely game. You're a candle walking around and it can auto combust at will. So that's how you get to see around, because it's always dark as heck, and also how you light up things in the environment, including the checkpoints. And logically, as a candle, you must not burn for long because you extinguish yourself. So you gotta watch out, and exploration is a lot of fun in the 3D environments with unusual movements on the platforms and always in the dark, which makes this a great game, hard to stop playing. Up next is one that I realize doesn't look like much, but it's an excellent game, Flat World. The graphics here are not too impressive, the character models are kinda basic, but the gameplay is surprisingly great. You have multiple characters to switch between, each with a different trait and ability. The main one can melt ice, another one can move stuff with his mind, and so on. And all of that is used in pretty clever and satisfying puzzles in the dungeons, as well as in the combat, which feels great, especially in boss fights. So gameplay wise, Flat World is simply excellent already. It's in early access so far, but it's getting close to full release as they already have a lot of environments ready. So I can say that this is pretty much guaranteed to be a great game when it comes out full. So keep an eye out for Flat World. Next is Ghostland Yard. This is very straightforward to explain. Ghostland Yard is 100% a precision platformer, very similar to Super Meat Boy in every way, meaning the controls are insanely tight, providing some pixel-perfect precision, and 1,000,001 things trying to kill you dead. Well, more dead, I guess, because you are already a ghost here. So yeah, excellent precision platformer, Ghostland Yard. Moving on to the structure among the breed. This is a breakout style game where you need to destroy everything on the opposite side, but now there are turrets shooting back and you have some cool skills like a crossbow to fight back more effectively. Destroyed objects will often drop currency, which you have to collect manually while always trying to avoid the ball from reaching the death saws on the other side, and this is very addictive in a great way and probably harder than it looks. One issue is that the game is not friendly to controllers at all. It's playable but barely. This is to play with the mouse. Better not grabbing it on Steam Deck or similar things. Okay, now for the retro hidden gem section. Like I said in the intro, for about 10% of the list, I'll be focusing on some retro games and some pretty awesome ones I want to talk about this time, beginning with Radiata Stories. This is a ridiculously high production value action RPG here. Seriously, it deserved a lot more recognition than it got. The graphics and animations are off the charts for a PlayStation 2 title. The main protagonist may look a bit generic, but trust me, all characters in this game have great personalities that are really easy to get attached to. This is a quite humorous game as well. On the gameplay side, it's an action RPG, similar to a Tales of game, and it may look like a button mashing type, but it's really not. You gotta be a bit more strategic when approaching and trying to hit the enemies, but in a really great way. It's hard to explain. This is a must-play action RPG if you're into them, with a spectacularly well-realized world and story. There's also an incentive to replay a second time, but finishing once is also fulfilling. Radiata Stories never left the PlayStation 2, and there are no PAL versions of it, so I'm afraid your options are the PlayStation 2 disc or emulation. Next, a brilliant game from Sony for the SNES that few know about, Equinox. This one is weird but worth it. The beautiful isometric graphics, especially for the time, allow for a slower but loads of fun gameplay, all about exploring and finding your way through dungeons. The game has this inexplicable adventure vibe, telling you next to nothing but enticing you with making discoveries on your own. It's awesome. Boss fights are a major highlight. There are many well done puzzles here too, always focusing on a more deliberate gameplay instead of a frenetic one, providing a different and amazing challenge here. Try this if you like your games odd. Next is the PlayStation 2 exclusive Skygunner. This is a remarkable 3D dogfight shooter that puts you in control of one of 3 small aircrafts, each representing a different difficulty. And the gameplay is incredibly unique because it automatically establishes your line of sight into the next target of your mission, which may sound like a bad idea, but it's very well implemented, as you still have full control of your airplane and you can manually adjust your direction to meet the targets. It's a very weird control style at first, but not a hard one to learn, and once you do, the missions become very enjoyable. This is a really cool game, Skygunner. This next one I've been meaning to talk about for the longest time. I even had it on my intro at some point, but I never featured it until now. This is the Wii exclusive Fragile Dreams. Okay, this is not for everyone. The game counts with an insistent weirdness in many ways, including character design, NPCs, gameplay, and especially in the story. Another thing that many people will find off-putting is that your character is kinda wimpy, just a young boy with not impressive moves at all. But this fits the horror gameplay. You're meant to feel inadequately suited for fighting against ghosts and such. As a Wii game, this focuses hard on the motion controls to great result. One of the best uses of it, in my opinion. Most locations are dark, so it feels cool to manually aim the flashlight around. You can also look around in first person, which is always enjoyable, but the game is slow paced, including in the combat. So this is more for a highly curious gamer looking for strange games with their own unique charm, because this has lots of that. moving on to a rather obscure game from Square, The Bouncer. This is a brawler, yeah, a brawler from Square. They were still Square Soft at this point. And look at the graphics designs here. This is so PlayStation 2 era Tetsuya Nomura, it hurts. We have blonde guy with horns here. The main character looks very similar to Sora from Kingdom Hearts. And everyone is wearing these dystopian future crazy fashion clothes. It's corny and cool at the same time. I don't know how Nomura does it. Frankly, gameplay wise, the combat is surprisingly deep with RPG stuff to upgrade your stats. And it works pretty well if you give it time to learn and unlock the combinations. On the negative side, the game is as linear as it gets. There is no freedom to explore, only the next brawling stage and cutscenes in between, that's it. But a cool game for sure, a cult classic nowadays. Next is a great action adventure from the PlayStation 1, Threads of Fate. It's a fun game where you choose one of two main protagonists, which are in different quests of their own, so there is a high replay value here because of that. The gimmick in the game is that you can transform into the monsters, and this changes the gameplay substantially. The story is lighthearted and funny, and just a joy to play. It's a PlayStation 1 exclusive physically, but you can still find it on a PlayStation 3 and Vita digitally. Another couple of games I've been wanting to talk about for the longest time are the From Software GameCube exclusives Lost Kingdoms 1 and 2. Okay, these are very strange. Budget in some ways, but fun nonetheless, and cool to see FromSoft older and even more out of left field stuff. The story here kinda sucks, graphics are whatever too, okay for the time I guess, but gameplay is where it's at. You basically have an assortment of attacks represented by cards, you build a deck of them, but the princess of wherever she is does jack shit. All attacks are performed by the creatures. What she does do is absorb them to be able to use them in combat later. What's cool is how varied each attack is. Some will pop up in front of her and do a slash, others will grant her buffs, and others still will stick around, effectively acting like summons, which are real cool. These games are interesting, man, as odd as they come, but lots of fun. Next, Deadhead Fred. This is an action game with a bit of platforming and exploration where you control Fred, who is dead and lost his head. Yeah, he was a private investigator who died on the job and was reanimated to complete his mission, but the doc couldn't fix his head, so he just left the brains. It's a funny and cool premise that fits perfectly into this weird and twisted world they created for the game. Fred can swap multiple different heads in the gameplay, unlocked one at a time, and they completely change his combat moves. This is an amazingly well done game with great graphics for the PSP, outstanding voiceover, great humor, and balanced combat. Next is QV. This is kind of reminiscent to Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, bringing a puzzle-oriented gameplay in small 3D dioramas. Puzzles here are very challenging, where one mistake leads to failure, so you will be restarting a lot. You can activate one and then the next you activate generates a two-way wormhole between the two. You can do that with any combinations of two portals, so you can imagine the amount of possibilities. Luckily, each stage also has multiple solutions, so it's a nice balance. Great puzzles here, very nice for big fans of the genre. Up next is a fantastic game I want to talk about once more, called Potato Flowers in Full Bloom. Yeah, potato flowers, let's go. I already talked about this one once, but I had to add it into one of these videos because it truly deserves it. Potato flowers is a unique kind of dungeon crawler RPG with a great battle system and deep customization. Dungeon crawler is a term that scares away many, including among RPG fans, but I'd really suggest you give it a try. The exploration factor is really well done here, with details that make it very enjoyable in clever ways. The dungeon maps are interconnected in interesting ways, full of stuff to discover, and life or death decisions to make at every turn. And battles are great. I'd even say they are a bigger highlight than the exploration itself. Basically, the game tells you who the enemies are aiming at and what kinds of action they will take. This may sound like it would make the battles too easy, but it's actually really clever and improves the combat, making those actions that are usually ignored in games like this, such as defending and dodging, absolutely necessary, because to compensate for telling you the enemy's actions, their damage is really high. This is one of the best dungeon crawlers I've played for sure. Next is Aeon Drive. This is pretty cool. It's a fast platformer where you are on a timer on every stage. Only 30 seconds, and stages are not that short. So to replenish time, you need to grab and manually use the canisters, but you need at least 4 of them to use. That adds a nice layer to the challenge, and then for the movement, you make a lot of use of your teleporting sword that can stick to surfaces and be thrown at any of the 8 directions. And then you can manually teleport to it or call it back. You also use it to destroy machines and some enemies, and there are lots of very challenging collectibles to find too. Real nice platformer here if you like a good challenge. Aeon Drive. Next is Hargehue and Friends. This is simple, a honest horizontal shooter, but a few things make it stand out. Basically how power-ups work. A friendly airplane shows up and throws it, so you gotta catch it in midair, because the power-ups are a necessity and dying once means you lose them. Or you can spend some hard-earned currency in the shop to pick up some other kinds of power-ups that helps out a lot, especially in conjunction with the thrown ones. So yeah, anyway, great gameplay dynamic, and the shooting itself is kinda simple, but it keeps you interested and makes it fun all the way. And there's a physical option for this one too. Following up with the creepy, weird and awesome Zeppelin Bygone. This one is weird in all the right ways. You are a creature that belongs to a hive mind, trying to absorb every creature's consciousness into its own. So you go around murdering creatures left and right, plucking their skulls from their corpses and wearing them. Yeah, that's the objective here. With every new skull comes a new ability like clinging to walls and double jumping. Each skull also have a set number of slots with different shapes in which you can fit the badges, which are called memories, and those grant you several enhancements. Zeppelin Bygone feels great to play. The Metroidvania aspect is fantastic here, with many different ideas thrown into the mix, and the atmosphere goes for a creepy, eerie vibe, never becoming horror or anything, but there are plenty of dark and damp places to explore, all fitting really nice to the weird story and setting. I really enjoyed this one. It counts with a physical option too. Moving on to one that took me long enough to try, and this is one of those that is split between critics and fans. We're talking about Ion Fury. This is a great first-person shooter. It's a Doom-style shooter, meaning it's fast-paced as heck, lots of cool weapons, so many hidden things, great enemy behaviors, and all that good stuff. What's funny is that critics and fans use the same argument for or against the game, and that argument is how it's a deliberate throwback. Fans love it, finding the challenge fun and engaging despite being simple, you know, not about complicated skill trees or anything, while the critics use the exact same argument against the game, which is just why? Is it that hard to see other people liking the fact it's simple? But anyway, it makes it simpler for me to explain it to. What you see is what you get. Ion Fury is pretty amazing, exactly like it is. Next is one I covered when it was in early access, and it has since fully released, and it's awesome. Lone Fungus. This is all about platforming. It definitely got a lot of inspiration from Hollow Knight and focuses a lot on the slash downwards mechanic that causes you to bounce off of enemies, spikes and other things, but the game found its own place with platforming, which is seriously impressive. Seriously impressive platforming here. There are so many mechanisms with so many gameplay implications that fit very well to the Metroidvania structure. Even in boss fights, it still focuses on the platforming. You'll have to move around a lot and use the mechanisms you unlocked, which are plenty and provide interesting gameplay ideas. Great game right here, Lone Fungus, and keep an eye out for the sequel, Lone Fungus Melody of Spores, which is in production. This series may be more famous, but I hear no one talking about this entry here, Pixel Junk Monsters 2. Took me a while to get into this series and I'm loving it. This is a hoot. It's a tower defense where you do the regular tower building as usual, but you control a character in the middle of it and control them to grab coins and other currencies they drop, as well as use some items against them. The game also looks gorgeous and starts with a big amount of towers to build already. The load times are kind of bizarrely long for some reason, but other than that, we have a great tower defense here. Next is one that I was thrilled when I saw it's getting a physical release soon. Silver Axe, The Honest Elf. Okay, the graphics here are basic for sure, but the game compensates on the gameplay, truly. Your sapling elf guy can learn new elemental abilities whenever he encounters these special tree trunks, and each ability will require you to do some directional inputs with the right analog stick in order to cast. The combinations are always over there, and the inputs down here. So for example, if you want to imbue your weapon with fire, you gotta press right thumbstick 3 times and then R2. It sounds like a nuisance, but actually translates to a cool and challenging gameplay, especially during boss fights, because you can stop the combination at any time and resume later. You can press up now, dodge an attack, and then down R2 to cast the Thunder spell, for instance. Each spell is very consequential, so using them is a necessity, and in that way they stroke a great balance to the gameplay here. You can even have several spells active at the same time. Great game and totally obscure as far as I know. Silver Axe, The Honest Elf. And up next is Grace Counter GM. This is a old school style vertical shoot 'em up that concentrates on the grazing. That's when you miss enemy shots by just a little, staying pretty close to them. Grazing is how you get your special meter up, and since it's always possible to graze, even in boss fights, you always have access to fill your special meter, making the gameplay feel more fair than most other shmups. That's pretty much it. The game is simple and short, but loads of fun. Grace Counter GM. This next one is called Mana Finder. It's a pretty solid turn-based RPG in all aspects. The story is cool. You control the Mana Finder Lambda, who has been exiled and now lives in a settlement. But in this world, mana is necessary to keep the settlement safe, so that's your primary goal here. Battles take place once you touch enemies roaming around, and this is a cool battle system where you will have to use the correct weapons and elements that will cause more damage to specific types of enemies. Imbuing yourself with elements is also used to increase your defenses, but of course opens the door to the opposite element to cause more damage to you. So that's the interesting strategy balance there, and the exploration aspect is also rewarding. So you have quite a nice package of aspects done right here. Cool RPG here, Mana Finder. Moving on to a real difficult game called Snakebird. Okay, this is for those of you who really like to wrap your brains around a deeply challenged puzzle game, because the task of creating bridges and stairs with the odd snakebirds so they can climb each other to reach the goal is insanely hard. So be advised about the challenge. But if that's exactly what you like, Snakebird is awesome for hours. Next is Speed Limit. This one is kinda crazy. There's almost no context here. It's just run to the right, killing whoever is on your way on a moving train. The coolest thing about it is the level design. As you begin, you will fear that the game may be repetitive, but it keeps throwing unexpected things your way, not only in the new enemies with different patterns, but also tunnels that turn off all the lights. Then you're forced to go to the train's roof and duck below passing signs, jump over gaps, and then the neighboring train shows up, and then there are guys there too. It's crazy hectic and hard as hell, but also addictive and rewarding. Really cool game, speed limit, and counts with a physical option too. Next is quite the relaxing game. The soundtrack is also pretty chill and a big highlight. This is Harlow. Was such a surprise. Harlow is a physics-based platformer where you control a robot that cannot walk, only jump. Yeah, weird. You can jump and then double jump, which only replenishes once it touches the floor. Everything else is gravity. Your objective is to gather all the energy triangles and optional little circles. Controlling the little robot with the double jump feels fantastic. They nailed this. It's pure joy. The story is pretty cool too. Check this out. Okay, this next one is in early access, but it's easy to see it's a fun and beautiful game. Verbals. Verbals is a 3D action adventure with colorful graphics, very well done sandbox environments, a quirky story, and a nice action adventure slash platforming gameplay with quite the interesting gimmick centered around the titular Verbals that are basically elemental little creatures. In each world you have a core Verbal filling the main body of the robot with its element, in this case it's rock, and then a secondary one on your hand that you can acquire and change through the levels. You combine both for a wide variety of attacks, like 2 rocks make a powerful machine gun like rock thrower, while rock and water makes for a wide-spreading mud thrower, and many more, including some more creative like rock and metal, creating rock and roll noisemaker. The combat is satisfying, and so is exploration and platforming with new moves to unlock. The only question now is how interesting they'll manage to make the later part of the game, introducing new elemental combinations and skills. The potential is easy to see, so here's hoping. Moving on to a game that sparked some controversy when it came out, Slave Zero X. Okay, the game came out buggy and with frame rate issues, but I gotta say, I played it just recently and found no issues, so I'm pretty sure the several patches released fixed them up. So I believe you can safely jump in now for a full action experience with some of the best graphics for the side-scrolling action genre. This is a hard game where combos and enemy behaviors can cause frustration to the player, another topic for contention on this game, but many will find the challenge very engaging. Not much more to say here, what you see is what you get. Next is a Devolver Digital game that didn't get any fanfare at all, Witch Eye. Admittedly, the game is simple, but within its modesty, this is a rather fun game with a unique gameplay, which I valued a lot. This subverts the roles here. You control the witch against the hero who stole your stuff, and you're after him to collect the stuff he drops around in each stage. The gameplay is unlike anything. The witch turns into a floating eye, hence the game's name, and you control it by flicking the thumbstick. Flick it anywhere to go that direction, and by pressing any other button, you stop. This gameplay is also super simple, but fun, especially given the enemy behaviors and the very well hidden collectibles too. The fact that each stage is tiny also helps in keeping the game always flowing. Nice one for sure here, Witch Eye. Next is Inked. This one looks amazing, right? Not only is the pen and paper art style really good looking, but the sporadic use of color improves it even more, quite striking. The gameplay is simple but really interesting. This is a puzzler where you can control shapes and position them wherever you want, many times having to use them in conjunction to achieve a wide range of goals. It also has a rather touching story. I really enjoyed it, give it a go. This also counts with a physical option. Next, for a deep and thoroughly interesting RTS called Songs of Silence. This is rather unique. I've never played an RTS with this mix of systems in place. It's a base builder slash auto battler slash card game, all within the RTS genre. Yeah, weird. You use cards for everything, including building your base, recruiting units, and giving special commands in battle. So it effectively turns the auto battles much more interesting, both before battle with recruiting and strategizing, and during it with the command cards. The art style is magnificent, the music is very enjoyable, so I really have high expectations for Songs of Silence as it approaches the 1.0 release. This next one blew me away, Cinemora X. What a great shmup. The main feature here is how instead of a life bar you have a time counter. Each enemy you kill adds to it and you can spend some of it to slow down time. It's really cool. You can also grab a bunch of power-ups and this creates a very interesting balance to the gameplay, quite a clever gameplay design. And the game also looks beautiful and counts with a physical option. Next, I feel like this one was misunderstood. I think it's kind of underrated. Vernal Edge. Okay, the game is not for everyone. You have a lot of freedom here, even for a Metroidvania. It's actually more of a stage-based Metroidvania, each stage being a medium-sized map, but right from the start you can go anywhere and will be hitting walls a lot. Combat is also kinda loose, you have a good amount of freedom, lots of attack moves and combos and all that, with everything being skill-based, including parrying, where it has a small duration. So what I mean is there is a lot of having to get used to things on the combat side, and some people will like that while others won't. The only real issue I had is the sound effects. They lack any kind of oomph, making it feel like you're not being effective when you are. It's kinda weird and it's a negative for sure, but not a major one. There are some really great boss fights here. The later part of the game gets real tough, and exploration, though loose, is pretty satisfying, including with the overworld, which I really like. So yeah, even with the shortcomings, I did enjoy Vernal Edge very much. This next one is great. What a cool action game with the awesome twist. We're talking about Deflector. As the game suggests, you can deflect stuff here, and not only enemy projectiles, but your own boomerang-like weapon, and doing so increases the damage the more times you deflect. This creates a gameplay that feels like a dance, with the skills having harmony between them and execution with a kind of a beat. It's pretty awesome. I also love the different weapons available. Some of them are really cool and change the game substantially. The roguelike structure is fun and not too complicated, and the music is a blast. Deflector is cool. Next, a very simple kind of fun in Larsen Laser. In this one you have to move around rooms filled with lasers and other traps, dodging everything while grabbing diamonds and other riches and finding your way out. The catch is that you have to memorize where all the hazards are to avoid them. And then the catch on top of that catch are the enemies moving around, and especially the lasers that swipe the whole level, so you can't stand around for too long trying to remember where everything's at. Like I said, super simple gameplay, kind of memory based, which is unusual, but lots of fun and a great pickup and play game too. Check it out. Next is a major gap between critics and players. We're talking about Dungeon Munchies. Look this up to find reviews below 5s for it, then look it up on Steam to find it overwhelmingly positive and be completely confused. But don't worry, I'm here for you, and as usual I agree to the player score much more. What reviewers fail to perceive is how deep and enjoyable the gameplay is due to the insane amount of items you can equip and how they change the moment-to-moment gameplay. And this variety is achieved despite of or even because of the simplicity in movement and animations, and even in the looks of the game, which is what the reviewers criticized a lot. They also ignore a fantastic story here, cool characters and great interactions. Dungeon Munchies is awesome. Moving on to a seriously challenging game called Bonfire Peaks. Okay, this one is one of the hardest puzzles I've ever played. The idea is to move boxes around to create a path for you to bring the main box with your worldly objects to the bonfire. You have a lot of restrictions on how to move, but at the same time you can do some unusual things, such as pushing box by turning while holding a box, as well as several ways to stack them up. All this requires a very unusual way to think to solve the puzzles that will be appreciated by big fans of the genre. The graphics are pretty interesting too, and the game has kind of a haunting atmosphere, which I liked. Nice one here, Bonfire Peaks. This one is really something. You may have heard of it, but also may have heard of the harsh criticism, which I disagree with. So let's take a look at Witchfire. Okay, let's be clear at what this is. It mixes two usually very hard genres by themselves. Witchfire is a Souls-like first-person shooter roguelike. So yeah, brutal for sure. Like Area 1, basic enemies pose a real challenge here. So it's likely overwhelming in difficulty, and that's exactly why lots of people are not jamming with it. It's so hard it will take take long until you start feeling good about your skill in the game, until you learn all the intricate game mechanisms, skills and power-ups, including all the rogue stuff you lose and the ones you keep, all the different weapons, and the insanely hard boss fights. So yeah, if you're a patient player willing to put in the work, there's an immensely satisfying shooter here, so that's up to you. Witchfire is still in early access, but clear to see the awesome potential. Next is the bonus section, where I analyze a few games that didn't quite make the list. These are not up to the high standards, but most may be appreciated by some of you. Beginning with Speedo Llama. This is not a bad game at all, rather fun actually, but too one note, I'm afraid. As the name suggests, this is a fast-paced side-scroller shooter where time is of the essence. You're on a timer on every level except boss fights. It's a fun gameplay for a while, but gets stale. The boss fights are not enough to fix that, as some of them are too easy. I do like the items you can buy and equip, improving your health, power-up drop rates and such, and I love the graphics here too. Music though is very unimpressive, so yeah, like I said, not up to the quality of the main list, but still a nice one. Now real quick, two games I got review copies for, but did not enjoy unfortunately. Those are Scathe and Sophie the Echoes. Scathe is a first-person shooter that looks great, but doesn't play great at all. Enemies are infuriating. You will quickly find that it's better to run past them as fast as possible to the end of the stage whenever you can, because some of them are just so irritating. A complete lack of cover shooting makes it even worse, and the roguelike aspect is also not well implemented. This is a skip for sure. And the same goes for Sophie the Echoes, which is simply broken in many ways. Just look at it. The main character has an ugly aesthetic, her running animation doesn't look right, the game stutters a lot, there are some rookie game design mistakes here, like using the same button for jumping and interacting with stuff, so many times you can't interact with stuff. Cover system is terrible, combat is atrocious in my opinion, you can't tell if you're hitting the enemies, if they're hitting you, you die super fast, it's a mess. Total skip, I'm sorry, let's move on. Next we have Marco Beyond Brave. What attracted me to this were the graphics, I really like them, but the animations are definitely missing some frames here. I realize it may be hard to see, but in combat some moves feel like they're missing something, resulting in a combat that feels weird. The Metroidvania locations are nice to explore, and boss fights are challenging, though too long, so they become repetitive most of the time. So yeah, at every turn the game makes some mistakes that add up to an inferior experience. Quite a shame, because this game could have been polished to be much better. Then next is Ginger the Tooth Fairy. Yeah, Ginger the Tooth Fairy, I gave that a try, and it's a pretty good game. It does lack polish in a lot of aspects, so don't come in expecting too much. Several sprites of items feel like they don't belong. There are some annoying instant death pitfalls that will make you start the stage all over, and some enemy hitboxes felt off. But that's it in terms of negatives. The game still offers a very nice gameplay. Ginger is a side-scroller platformer with the same structure found in Super Mario 64 of all things. When entering a stage you can see all the teeth replacing the stars that you still have to find, and you can wander around each stage freely. They don't really have an ending, and it's pretty cool to find hidden paths, solve the simple puzzles, and defeat bosses to gather the teeth. I had fun with this, level design is really well made, and graphics are overall pleasant. Next are the final 10 games, where I place some of the best highlights of the list, beginning with the lovely Ogu and the Secret Forest. This is next to impossible not to love. Ogu and the Secret Forest is 100% a top-down Zelda-like, counts with a whole huge world to explore, towns to visit, full of NPCs to meet of all shapes and sizes. Action is a bit on the simple side, but enjoyable nonetheless, and there are loads of pretty great puzzles to solve here too. Plus the graphics are beyond pleasant and colorful, music is a joy, there are loads of side activities like fishing. I mean, I could go on, but like I said, hard not to love this, enough said, try it out. Given how much love is shown to Hades, deservingly so, you'd expect that this one would be more famous. Curse of the Dead Gods. This did get a limited run release, but I feel like it's still far away from the recognition it truly deserves. Cause what a fun and unique game, which is saying a lot given it populates one of the most prolific genres in today's time, the action roguelike genre. So yeah, you get the regular rogue structure here, runs are very hard, you keep improving some things, it gets less hard, lots of randomized stuff, and boss fights are a real challenge, but gameplay is where this shows its true colors. There's a whole light and dark mechanism here, where if you get hit in the dark, you get more damage, while in the light you get less damage, but to keep things lit, you need to use your torch to either find fire pits or improvise finding some burnable things like spider webs in the environment or burn enemies, which is really cool. What a cool concept. And it's more than that, because lots of upgrades and skills modify the light and dark mechanism, adding more rules to it. And then combat is absolutely solid, very fun and fluid. Great game here, Curse of the Dead Gods. Next is the unusual The Bookwalker Thief of Tales. Okay, this is a mix of point-and-click adventure, puzzles, and a turn-based combat as well. Quite the interesting mix. Even more so with the introduction of a hub area of sorts, which is your house, where the game is in first person for a nice change of pace, focusing on the story and allowing it to flourish a lot. The story is about recovering powerful items and artifacts from books. You literally enter the story of a book with the help of a machine and a helper gadget as well, and interact with stories, characters, and locations to recover the item for the corporation that hired you. Creative idea for sure here. Gameplay is similar to point-and-click games, with a very nice looking isometric perspective that I like, and locations that you search around for items in order to progress. A classic puzzle adventure gameplay, but then to change things up, every now and then there will be turn-based combat encounters. Those are rather hard, where you spend your ink to use attacks with varied effects like stunning enemies or absorbing their ink. Cool combat for sure, making this a rather complete title. The Bookwalker, deeply interesting guys, check it out. Next is a spectacular game that got some recognition but not nearly enough. This is Tevi. Tevi is a terrific Metroidvania with one of the best gameplays in the genre, hands down. The chibi character sprites may not be everyone's favorite, but the gameplay is undeniably great. Combat is solid, especially in boss fights, which are long, they're tough to take down, and can have hard to learn patterns, with some bullet hell-ish moments too. You have two helping characters who become floating orbs around you that change how you shoot in this game, which is a pretty cool side of the combat, and also used in the exploration. The Metroidvania stuff here is terrific, with some of the best progress and exploration of this kind, plus the story and characters are funny and witty, especially the protagonist and her dad. Very nice game here, its quality commands way more recognition, so I'm happy to give it mine. So there you go, Tevi, Metroidvania at its best. Next, let's take a look at some creepy shit with After Dream. This, in my opinion, nails the atmosphere. It gets really creepy immediately, with dark rooms, freaky creatures, eerie NPCs, and a desolate helplessness that permeates the entire game. Gameplay-wise, it focuses on clever puzzles that are more about simple logic and less about being complex, which is not to say that they are easy, not at all. Some are real head-scratchers, but the solution is always about simple things and a logical use of them. The game also counts with a gimmick in the camera that reveals interactable doors that you couldn't open before. This adds a nice layer to the horror too. So yeah, cool creepy game here for sure, After Dream. Next is quite the haunting and beautiful game, which is a combination that always makes it interesting for me. We're talking about Self-Loss. This is something, definitely a deeper game than it looks. Gameplay goes places here, both in the exploration / puzzle solving, which manages to escape the obvious, bringing different kinds of gameplay ideas, mostly tied to the light you can emit, which comes in different types, as well as other things like fishing into the solving of puzzles and the exploration itself. It's really well made. And the combat is also impressive and out of the ordinary, once again focusing on the light you can produce, but much deeper than a single layer like flashing the light to stun and hit them later. That's not at all what this is, and it's rather quite deep. And on top of it all, the atmosphere, creatures, locations, and narrative all creepy without turning the game into horror at all. But very nice, guys. This is a beautiful game, self-loss, definitely worth picking on physical if that's what you prefer. Next is the most overwhelming game I've ever played. Seriously, I'm not exaggerating here. So be warned, this is surely not for everyone, but if you're up to the very tall challenge of getting good at this, it can become your favorite game of all time or something. As well as some serious bragging rights. We're talking about the mesmerizing Hyperdemon. Okay, I haven't quite gotten all the crazy things you can do in this game. It's seriously difficult. I am still struggling, so I'm also showing some other people playing it in the video here so you can see what is possible in Hyperdemon. It's godlike gameplay is what's possible in Hyperdemon. Holy crap. This is a first-person shooter against freaky creatures straight from hell and some psychedelic as shit graphics that will either hypnotize you or give you a seizure. The gameplay is all kinds of frenetic and as hard as it gets. Luckily, there is a thorough tutorial here, which is absolutely mandatory. The objective is to increase your score. This is very much an arcade-like game, but the score furiously drops down non-stop, so you gotta be quick and precise about the demon killing to rack up more points. Each demon has a few preferred ways to be killed, so you'll need to learn all that very well, and it's far from only shooting them. You gotta shoot, then they dismember or react in many other ways. Then you need to use all your many other gameplay mechanics like dashing and slashing, dagger jump and stomping them, and especially grabbing crystals they drop and throwing them for explosions or using them on yourself to amass power-ups, and how all that changes everything is both stupefying and insanely difficult to pull off. So yeah, how hardcore of a gamer are you? Are you a finger cramp immune, bloodshot eyes, full solid metal hardcore gamer? If so, you may enjoy the heck out of Hyperdemon. If not, better stay away. This one has very recently picked up a good amount of attention since the Game Awards stuff started coming out, but I decided to keep it anyways because it's still to be released for PlayStations 4 and 5 for instance, so there's a lot of room to grow for this. We're talking about Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. It's a puzzle game in first person with some stylish graphics. It brings me an uncanny Resident Evil 1 vibe because of the mansion you explore, but gameplay is all about the complex and multi-subject puzzles of all kinds. It's a game to play with pen and paper, keeping track of locked rooms and hints and ideas. The story is excellent too, so yeah, this is an amazing game, a must play in my opinion. This next one just came out physically and it's a freaking great game. This is Conscript. Okay, this is a brutal game both in difficulty and setting. It effectively brings a true feeling of dread of war, or what I suppose it must be like. Conscript is a World War I game in the trenches with enemies invading your trench and a kind of a horror vibe even. It's chilling, man. The graphics are great in my opinion. I love the isometric view, the bleak colors to intensify the dread, and then the gameplay, which is intense. You can explore around for supplies and documents. Many doors are locked, so exploration is a strong aspect here, which is kind of unexpected. Then you find your way through the trenches and close to the front, and things get really heavy. This game has difficult controls. Aiming has a delay to focus for fire weapons, while melee ones are heavy, and the animations reflect that. And this is all to convey realism, and it does exactly that. You will be finding yourself not taking an enemy down and having to switch to melee, and that will many times mean bashing their heads in with a freaking shovel. It's brutal. Incredible game, I love it, and it just came out physically too. Next, we've got the side game of a major Kickstarter project that I was happy to highlight some time ago and support. This is Pennyblood Hellbound. It's getting common nowadays, I guess, when a game gets a lot of support on a crowdfunding campaign, that they make a side game first in a different genre. And that's what Hellbound is. If you don't know, Pennyblood is an RPG in production, said to be the spiritual successor of the Shadow Heart series. Those were all PlayStation 2 turn-based RPGs, and Pennyblood is a very promising game I'm looking forward to. But while it's not released, Hellbound can already be played as it's in early access and it's a roguelike action RPG, and a very well made one of those. Not only in the graphics with some exquisite character designs, but also in the gameplay itself. You'll find some regular isometric action here with attacks, special attacks, and dodging, and also some unique interesting ideas like blood surfing, which I found a lot of fun. As you defeat enemies, pools of their blood form in the ground, and then you can dash and hold over them to surf, which increases your speed, and you can connect an attack which varies completely depending on the character you're using. Each character is widely different, which I also enjoyed, as I found each one of them useful and better for different situations, which is great because you can bring 2 of them per run and swap between them. Hellbound can also be played online or locally with friends in multiplayer, which is great, and the progression here is through the roof. A whole lot to improve and all meaningful and exciting. Excellent game here in early access, but clearly very promising and almost guaranteed to be a great one in full. Alright everyone, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the 100 game special and found lots of new and interesting titles to add to your already out of control backlogs. Let us know down in the comments which games piqued your interest and what other games you've been playing that you would like to share. I always respond to most, if not all, the comments, so we can have a chill conversation. Do check out the rest of the Hidden Gem series for literally hundreds more games. This channel is not about me, it's about these fantastic games. I do this out of a deep passion I have for this art form, especially for these titles made by small teams or solo developers who truly pour their souls into their projects and many times don't get their minimum due recognition. This is very much a niche topic. It's very hard to compete with all the flashy, controversial and reaction-based content that floods YouTube nowadays. So to keep this going, I rely on the value for value model. If you think you get some good value out of my work and would like to return some of that value to me, you can do so in many ways. You can share this with your friends, support directly through Patreon, which is the most effective way, or through Super Thanks for a one-time donation, and the usual subscribe and like and all that also helps out a lot because of the algorithm. This size of video is just to commemorate the milestone reached. I appreciate all of you who support the channel a lot and wanted to do something special in commemoration. I know it took longer than anyone wanted to get this done. My other job got in the way a lot, and it's what I have to concentrate on right now due to financial restrictions, but still I'm glad how this turned out. So thank you all so much for everything, and here's to many more games ahead. This has been From the Void. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.